I'm Sherry. I'm a volunteer with Easter Seals and CTN. And I'm here with Daniel Pioni. He's an SLP with CTN. He's actually my daughter, speech therapist. And Jennifer, Jennifer Facinelli. She's a parent too and also a teacher. And we're going to talk to you about our journey with AAC. And Daniel's going to start.
Just before we go any further,
thank you.
I was trying to catch Sherry, but I think it's sort of started to me. To remind people to come back into the theater at the end of your session.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so I do have a speaker that should work. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
It's just for the single recording.
Okay. Okay, great. So my section will be related to AAC, what you will need to do to pretty much start from scratch, and what are some of the key concepts, some foundational basis that we know support successful implementation of an augmentative communication system. So in preparing for this presentation, I looked up definition, and I found this definition online from the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. It's a good definition. It tells us that basically AAC is everything that we use to communicate except for speech. And obviously we use gestures, we use facial expressions and body language. So it's kind of a continuum of symbols, signs to relay a message from eye gaze to gestures to speech generating devices. And of course, we'll be talking about visuals and symbols and devices that can speak. So the definition tells us that alternative means basically that we're using something different than speech, and that's fine. That's clear. There is different systems out there. Of course, we'll be focusing on visual communication, and there are different systems, different tools because of different reasons. And we'll touch on that briefly, why we go with one system versus another one. Another huge concept that's within the name of AAC is augmentative. So augmentative basically means that you add language and symbols to what you're already doing. So those gestures, the eye gaze, the pointing, now you have a system that allows you to overlay visual symbols to your communication. It's augmentative because it adds as opposed to replacing. So whenever you are, and when we talk about modeling, whenever you are modeling communication through an augmentative communication system, you don't stop pointing, you don't stop talking, you don't stop gesturing, you do all that, plus using an augmentative communication system, which makes us multimodal. A multimodal communicator is what we all are. And so the big question is, how do we learn language and symbols in general? So we're looking at typically developing children as well as children with special needs. And we were talking briefly over lunch. There is really one universal way by which we acquire language, and that is the receptive language model. And we know that's true across languages, across cultures, and even across species, the species that we know use language. You need to have comprehension of language or a symbol before you can use it. And so, again, what happens in typically developing children is they receive lots of input for many months before we can expect them to express the first word approximations. And then, of course, you make a big deal, and it's reinforced, and then language gradually progresses from there. But again, it starts with building up comprehension, so receptive language. So in essence, parents and caregivers make language happen. It's about co-constructing language together. Another major concept is that language, or the process of acquiring language, is interdependent. So that means that no one can learn language by themselves. You have to have someone interacting with you. It's social, and it's not an independent task. It's not something that you can do it by yourself, or that you need to demonstrate independence when learning to communicate, because there's always going to be that feedback when you learn to communicate with people. They look at you, they give you an acknowledgement, and they help you, so you build language together with your partners. So again, communication is a community thing, because unless you are born in a community that uses that language, you're not going to develop that form of language. It's true for children who are born deaf or hard of hearing. They will not start developing sign language just because they can't hear speech. They will develop sign language because caregivers will be signing with them from birth, even though at first those signs will make no sense, but because you're signing in context, you're touching the meaning, and again, time will create comprehension, and kids will start using sign to express themselves. Another example that it's linked to mainstream education is what happens now when you want your child to learn French. You send them to French immersion, where they are exposed to a teacher speaking French from the get-go, even though they have no French background, as opposed to sending them to French classes. So again, it all goes back to the fact that unless you are immersed in a community that uses that language, you're not going to develop it. And so what about our children who need AAC to communicate? So with the concepts of receptive language model, community, building out the comprehension, if you only talk to them and you expect them to use a communication system, we know that's not going to work. So they may understand you, but they don't know how to use this system to communicate, because no one else is showing it to me. So we need to apply the receptive language model of language. Basically, you become the language. You walk the walk with your child. You expect your child to learn to use a speech-generating device. You must use that speech-generating device to communicate with your child. And we know that when you are supporting your input, your oral input, with symbols, with visual symbols, that creates comprehension, shows how the symbols are linked to an item, an action, a feeling. Again, that process makes it explicit. And then, of course, we get children that, yes, I understand. I understand because mom, dad, siblings, teachers at school, EAs, they use the same system. The symbols always correspond to that concept. So there is some terminology. One that is often referred to is aided language stimulation. It's basically what would be the term used in research and literature that refers to the receptive language model applied to AAC. So I like to call it hand-in with visuals. For those of you who are familiar with hand-in language facilitation strategies, you learn how to communicate with your child. You learn how to facilitate language by making some slight adjustments to the way you're interacting. With this system, you're doing all that, plus you're using visuals. So again, it's multimodal. You're using the same mode of communication that you expect your child to learn to use over time. So in essence, you're augmenting, as a partner, you're augmenting your own communication. Again, it's walking the walk. So just like oral communication, communicating with AAC is about giving your child the language to meet today's needs, as well as learning for tomorrow. So if you look again at what happens in natural language acquisition, you don't talk to your child using 5 words because you want them to master those 5 words, because if you don't master those 5 words, then they can progress to the next ones. It doesn't work like that. You talk about many things in context, joint attention, and that again, in time creates meaning. But your language is way above the child's expressive level. Yes, yet it doesn't stop you from talking about many things. So we need to do the same thing when we use AAC. We keep that in mind. And we use, again, what we know there are best practices, evidence-based practices, concepts that support learning for children who need to use AAC. Vygotsky is a psychologist, a Russian psychologist who passed away very young, but he had a tremendous impact on learning and language. And these 2 concepts, dynamic assessment and the zonoproximal development, very important concepts. Dynamic assessment, basically, it tells us that you learn your child's capacity by being with your child on a daily basis. It's about finding out what your child is capable of by testing, by upping the ante a little bit, by challenging, by always providing language that is a little bit above your child's current expressive capacity, which refers to the zonoproximal development. It's a little bit like the Goldilocks zone. If you program language that is below that zonoproximal development, boring. Already know those words, already know how to communicate. I might not have those words exactly, but I can get by, so I don't need it. If your program's too high or above that zonoproximal development, concepts are maybe a little bit too difficult. I can't use them. Too unfamiliar. So you want to be in that Goldilocks zone, which means that you're still programming a step or 2 your child's expressive language skills. So you're helping the child progress with their expressive language skills. And of course, partners and how they facilitate language are the most important and crucial thing. The definition that it's basically a collaboration. So we talk about some of the things that I'm trying to collapse really lots of information in a short period of time. But when you consider AAC tool for your child, there are a few factors. So the first one that comes to mind is a child that is capable of directly accessing content. So let's take the example of a speech generating device. The child may need to be able to point to the visuals on the touch screen so that the message can come out. For some children, they may need indirect access. So that can look like an eye gaze system or partner-assisted scanning, where you have a partner that supports you and tell you, okay, these are your choices. When you hear the one that you want, you tell me yes, or you signal, yes, that's the one I want. There are low-tech visual tools, high-tech speech-generating devices. Sometimes there is a benefit in just being able to leaf through pages because I can control that very easily, as opposed to maybe trying to navigate one page. I touch the screen with my palm and it moves into another page and can create more frustration. So some of the things to keep in mind. And then text-to-speech, that should always be a feature in your child's communication system. If anything, it's a pencil. It's a pencil. You can use it to scribble. You can use it for letter sound correspondence or to just play with. But it's literacy. And literacy within language is part of that continuum. You also want to be mindful of how content is organized, because you want to develop the automaticity in word retrieval, and that comes with keeping content in a consistent location so that you can tap into motor memory. Motor memory is basically what allows us to, once you learn how to drive, to get in the car and start driving, because you don't need to stop and look where the key goes, which pedals I have to press. When you are in the kitchen cooking, you know where your spices are, where the garbage can is, so you don't have to, again, stop and think, where are these things, because it becomes automatic. So again, the importance of keeping content in a consistent location. So my role as an SLP with Augmentative Communication Services, CTN, we work with the Assisted Devices Program, the Ontario Assisted Devices Program, and they fund certain apps, certain communication systems. So I'll be talking about some of the apps and systems that are out there, with the exception of one example that I give. I just want to spell that out. Speak for Yourself is not one app. It's not one of the apps that I'm talking about that is funded by ADP. But ProLoco2Go, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with ProLoco2Go, is a popular app. It's a core and fringe organization where basically you're looking at a main screen with a bunch of core words. Your core words are your pronouns, your verbs, some attributes, some prepositions, the words that we know through research that are used frequently in English when we speak and when children start to communicate. And then you tap a folder that opens up your fringe content, which is your food, your places that you go to, the people, colors, that can go on and on. And ProLoco2Go tends to be pretty easy to learn in that it has a one-to-one correspondence with hit to message, as opposed to some of the other apps. For example, if you look at LAMP Words for Life, which is an app, or New Voice, which is a Premkey Romkey company. It's a communication software. Some of you may know what a Vantage or a Springboard Light or an Accent. So it's basically a software that allows you to communicate about anything and everything, past, future, sentence structure. It's a language-rich system. Of course, when you're learning to communicate, there is a lot of language there. So you need to have a lot of support from partners. Somewhere in between ProLoco2Go and something like LAMP Words for Life, it's Touch Chat with Word Power. So Touch Chat, again, is another app. Dynavox is the company that is behind it. And Touch Chat with Word Power is a good tool to allow you to sequence longer sentences with fewer hits. So the screen are dynamic. The moment you tap, say, I want, then it pops up on the screen with basically fill in the blank, and that can keep going. And with 3 hits, you can express 6, 7 word sentences. So very powerful that way. But again, it requires some language understanding and being able to have good partner support. So those are features that we want to consider when we use an AAC tool, but most importantly is the habits. The habits that as partners, as communication partners, we bring to the equation. It's how we bring communication to life. Again, it's going back to the receptive language model. You are the partners, you create language, you create meaning. So some of the very important habits is that you need to know your child AAC system just like you know your cell phone. You need to know where content is organized, how to retrieve it, how to program it, and of course you must use it. There is no if and buts. Use it. It's a must. You can use your child AAC tool to tell what's happening next. So these are things that happen normally. You don't have to use only your only the AAC tool. Remember, communication is multimodal, so you can say, it's time for snack, and you press snack. And then within that activity, you can offer choices. Would you like apple or banana? So again, it's not reinventing the wheel, it's the typical interaction that you would have with your child, except you're layering a visual mode of communication in the form of an AAC tool. And then what we do in general, we talk about what we see, and we talk about what we do. And again, you use that, you do that using your AAC, your child AAC tool. So it's the concept of symbol to object correspondence, it's symbol to action correspondence, or symbol to feeling. So you talk about how you feel and what you see out the window. Of course, all these things require joint focus of attention. So the child must be interested, must be engaged. Otherwise, if there's no attention, obviously, the information is not going to go in. And the other thing that we normally do is that we comment. Something is good, something is bad, it's yucky. Again, these are language concepts that unless we expose our children and we show them how we use them through a communication tool, it's going to be really hard for them to acquire. So exposure, and many repetitions. So what happens that when you start mediating your interaction through the AAC tool, opportunities will just start happening. You don't have to, again, reinvent what I'm doing today or structure the environment. You use the system, and communication opportunities are part of your daily life. So some specific things that you can do, you can use the AAC tool to acknowledge that you understand your child message, even if the message is non-symbolic. For example, there's a ball, the child is reaching for the ball, you want the ball, interpret and say, I understand you want ball. That's it. So the communication is done. You don't have to make your child now point and do the same thing, because the moment he reaches for the ball, that tells you that's what I want. You have to be, again, the smart partner interpreting, this is how you can say it too. You can rehearse communication exchanges. Again, that's something when, say, dad is coming home, when dad comes home, we're going to ask, go walk. Right? So dad is going to go in 5 minutes, let's practice again. Dad comes home, okay, let's go. And of course, a little bit of rehearsal, 3, 4, 5 times, but you will set your child up for success doing that. The other important thing with rehearsing communication exchanges is that the person that is receiving that communication is unaware of the message. So it becomes even more reinforcing for the child, because now, wow, I'm really able to get my message across even when people are not prepared to what I'm trying to say. Expanding on what your child is saying. So again, the child points to juice, or maybe using a communication book or AAC system like a speech generating device, the child says juice. Of course, I give you juice, but I'm also going to expand on what you said. So within that context, the child says juice. You can say many things. You can say more juice. You can say like juice. You can say good juice. So again, you give the language that supports comprehension within that context. And of course, you teach it. You teach it just like you do teach language orally. You will teach it using your AAC tool. And that's where that zone of proximal development, Vygotsky zone of proximal development, comes into place. Is if your child is capable of expressing 2 words, then you're modeling 3 to 4 word combinations. So you stay a step or 2 above your child's expressive language skills. And then in order to help generalize all these skills, you support practice with family and friends, and you try as much as possible to build an AAC-friendly community. And I'm going to end my section with this quote. I don't know who wrote it, but I found it in a few places, few articles, and it makes perfect sense. If you don't model what you're trying to teach, then you're teaching something else. Jennifer? Sorry?
I think you're,
Oh, yes.
or, should I use this one? Yeah. Whatever works.
It's for the...
She can use that too.
Okay.
Maybe you should just hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer, and I'm here today to give you a personal experience with AAC with my daughter, Ava. My daughter, Ava, was diagnosed with Rett syndrome at age 22 months, and leading up to it, we suspected that might be the case, and certainly when she was diagnosed, I did probably what many of you parents did upon receiving a diagnosis, which was I turned to my most trusted doctor, which was Dr. Google. And I did a Google search, and I searched Rett syndrome, and it was possibly, by the way, if you have not done that, I don't recommend doing that. Because what happens when you Google Rett syndrome is or any genetic disorder, you come up with a list of negatives, of can'ts, of won't be able to, or will nevers. And some of the ones that come up with Rett syndrome, and Rett syndrome sure is a laundry list of a lot of things that people like to say that will happen or will not happen. So on top of all the medical things, some of the things that I read were that she would never walk, she would not have purposeful hand use, she would have extremely low cognitive function, she would never talk or communicate. And that last one for me, the communication one, was particularly devastating because as a parent, that's me. Communication with your child is how you get to know your child. It's how your child can express themselves, right? Like how am I ever going to understand what's going on with my daughter? And it was a very, very, very difficult thing to read and to accept. And I'm not the accepting type, so I did not accept that. And I kept reading down my list. I think once you start getting past page 1, 2, and 3 of your Google search, that's when you sort of get to the fringe information that comes up. And one night, I think it was around 2 in the morning, I came across a video of a little girl using an eye gaze computer to communicate. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't, because her eyes were accessing the screen, and she was able to communicate basic things, but she was communicating. And if you go back to this lovely slide here, which I did not enjoy writing, it was quite a shock to see, here's this little girl who, all the information I'm having about this syndrome is that the kids are maybe at a 9-month cognitive function, that's it. And by kids, I don't mean just children, that's where they're going to plateau. But here she was communicating. She was agreeing with the person running the session. She was disagreeing. She was complaining. And I thought, wow, what is this? And so immediately I woke up my husband, who was in a deep slumber, and I said, look at this. We need to have this. I don't know what this is, but I need this. I need this. And at the time, I thought, well, if I can just get her to say yes or no, like how transformative is that, right? For her to say, no, I do not want the juice. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, that could stop the crying, that could stop screaming, and it could really affect her quality of life, just yes or no. And so I sort of took off on this, and I never looked back. And I'm happy to tell you that actually Ava does a lot more than communicate just yes or no today. She communicates very effectively her wants, her needs, her thoughts, her opinions. She's 3.5. She has a lot of opinions for a 3.5-year-old, and I wouldn't change it, and I think it's fabulous. So my idea today, when I was asked to speak to you about my experience, I know looking around in the room, that there are a lot of different diagnoses represented here today. Rett syndrome has very specific things that need to be done in order for good communication to take place. But these 5 key strategies that I wanted to talk to you about, as a parent, I am a teacher also, and I actually do have a special education background. However, nothing prepared me for this, nothing, I can tell you, prepared me anything even remotely. In fact, I had to look up AAC when someone suggested it to me. I didn't know what it was. So these are 5 different strategies that I think apply universally to anyone who is nonverbal. Watching this, and I remember 2 years ago when I first started looking into this, I really thought, oh, there is no way. Look at Rett syndrome. There's no way that my daughter is going to be able to do this stuff, and she does it well. So hopefully you can come across. It may look different for your child than it does for my child, but I really think that everyone can communicate and learn to communicate effectively by following these key steps. I'll go through in 10 minutes. We'll see. So the very first one to talk about is interaction and reaction. And so if you open any parenting book, I remember with my older daughter who is neurotypical, it said, just talk to your kid all day long. Talk, 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 talk. And so that's number one, is you need to talk as much as possible. Expose your child to as much language as possible. And I know that seems so painfully obvious, but at least in my case, when Ava was going through her regression, and I wasn't getting anything back. And as a parent, it's depressing, it's difficult, and it's difficult to have a one-sided conversation. But you have to do it. And not just talk about just the same thing over and over again, but a diverse language, different types of parts of speech, different types of descriptors. You just want to expose and immerse in language as much as possible. But of course, eventually, you need that reciprocation to come back, right? Because communication just can't be one-sided. Even if your daughter or your son is nonverbal, you need that reciprocation in order to feel like or to understand one another. So this is obviously a little bit challenging for anyone who is nonverbal, particularly also if there are motor delays. My daughter can't point, can't pick anything up. So how is she reciprocating? And in fact, I took Ava to a specialist in Chicago when we first started with all this. Actually, she was the specialist in that video that I saw, Susan Norwell. I saw her, she was the one at the Toby, the eye gaze computer, and I looked her up and I thought, I need to see this woman too. So we went, and within 5 minutes of meeting with her, she said, wow, Ava is just such a great communicator. Just look at the way she's saying yes. And I come again? I don't know what you're talking about. My daughter is nonverbal. That's why we're here. And she said, well, every time that she says something or that I say something and she agrees with or that she wants to say yes, she looks up. And sure enough, I had to step back a little bit and I watched for that session. And I couldn't believe, I was like, you're right. I never noticed that before. And now, it's very, very obvious now to anyone, I think, that Ava has a clear yes by looking. Now, not everybody is going to be able to make eye contact, especially children on the autism spectrum disorder. That might be a difficult thing. So you have to be a detective and find any attempt to communicate, no matter how minuscule. I know I have friends who, it's an eyebrows raise, maybe it's a cheek that goes, maybe it's going to be a tap, maybe it's going to be something that is oral, maybe it's a grunt. And you look for that, you look for a pattern. If you see it 2 times, 3 times, identify it, name it, and say, wow, good telling me yes by looking at me. And if you are at all wondering, well, is my child understanding this concept? Apply it, respect it, and then eventually they will. So the example I like to use with Ava is if I asked her, would you like some ice cream? And she looked up, I'd say, good looking at me to say yes, here's some ice cream. And then in the next 5 minutes, if I said, do you want to go and do some exercise? Which she doesn't like to do. And if she looked up at me, I'd say, great, good looking at me to say yes, let's go do some exercise. And then eventually, actually, it didn't take that long, she started figuring out, wait a sec. Every time I look up at mommy, and if she says yes, good saying yes, then she's learning that if she's communicating in that way, and by naming it, by identifying it, you're honoring that with your child. You're showing your child, yes, I understand what you're saying. I understand that you are trying to communicate with me. So be a detective and find what it is. Videotaping, if you're having trouble, videotape yourself. I'm the queen of videos. I videotape almost every interaction I have with my daughter. And part of it is so that I can look back and see what is it I'm missing, what is it I'm doing that's maybe too much, too little. I talk a lot, first point. And in fact, I talk so much that my daughter the other week, she said on her device, she said, stop talking, Mom. And it's pretty funny, actually. And speaking of a high-tech device or any type of device or system that you have in place, you need to be a meaning maker. And what that means is you need to give context to whatever selection that they say, and you need to make it make sense, even if it doesn't make sense to you. And it all comes back to, again, just basic things that you would do with any, for instance, if you were sitting at dinner with a toddler and you're having a nice pasta dinner, it's very quiet, maybe there's a candle going. This is my fantasy, it doesn't happen at our house, but maybe in your house. And all of a sudden the toddler yells out, puppy! So you're not going to say to the toddler, well, clearly you don't understand what a puppy is. So let's leave that alone and keep eating our dinner. No, you're going to go and you're going to say, puppy. Why are you saying puppy? Are you talking about the puppy that we saw at the park? Or are you talking about the puppy, our next door neighbor's puppy? He's being really loud. So you're going to give meaning to it. And the same thing, that's how they're going to understand that what I'm doing is I'm communicating. Every time I say something on my device, using my device or my system, I'm communicating something to someone. Here's a little example, and I know I do talk a lot, so this is an example of interacting. So this is Ava after 1 month. This is her Toby, so her eyes are making the selections. You can see when she says drink, I'm putting a drink in her mouth. If she says food, please, I am putting food in her mouth. If she says yucky, all done, I'm going to get mad at her for saying, what do you mean my cooking is yucky? Right, so I'm giving her that immediate feedback of what she's saying. Just move on here.
Yeah.
And I think this presentation will be online later on, I'm guessing. And those videos, if you want to go back and watch them, you're more than welcome to do that. And so the next thing that's been really key in our, I hate to say journey, but there it is, our journey in communication is modeling. And what does modeling mean? So modeling just basically means do it yourself. So much jargon. Someone said that in another session, jargon. There's so much jargon in education. There's so much jargon in communication or speech language therapy, and fancy terms for things. Modeling, just do it. You use the device yourself. Because really, when we talk to, going back to that first analogy of when we talk to babies, we're modeling how to talk back to them. Even though they can't speak back, a little newborn or a 2-month-old is not going to speak back, but we're showing them, we're modeling to them spoken language. So that eventually, once they gather all that information in their head and they're ready to start talking, they've had examples of how to talk this whole time. And our kids who are nonverbal, we need to do the same thing. We need to model to them how to talk using their device, because that is, I think Daniel won't like this, but that is their voice. That is how they're going to talk. I always call Ava's Toby her voice, because that is how she is going to communicate with me. And she needs to learn, mommy also can speak this way. And not just mommy, her sister, her grandfather, everybody needs to talk that way. So you need to talk, and model all the time. And again, if a baby doesn't talk back to you when they're 2 months old, no one stops talking to that baby, right? We don't stop talking because they're not talking back, because we know, well, they're little, they need to learn how to talk. And the same thing with our nonverbal kids. Be age appropriate. So if you're starting with a 3-year-old using terms like poopy and yucky, great. If you're talking with a 16-year-old child or a 16-year-old student, you're not going to use language that's geared towards a toddler, right? You need to be respectful of that language, because with our kids who are nonverbal, we don't know what they understand. We don't. We will eventually once we put these things into place. But you need to assume that they are understanding, and you want them, that they're going to want to speak the way that their peers are speaking. And finally, on this topic, you need to have expectations, very, very, very high expectations, except for the expectations are not for your child to use the device, but it's for you to use the device, because again, that's how they're going to learn. So here is a quick example. I'll sort of talk through it. This is Ava. She's doing a little art activity. She's making a craft for her cousin. So here I am modeling. I don't use my eyes to access the screen. I'm actually using my a touch screen. She uses her eyes. So I think I said make a picture for family. And she's processing this. She's not saying anything quite back yet. And that wait time is really, really important. But you can see that she comes back and she chooses those 4 words from a list of 32 on the screen, those exact 4 words, because she's learning, oh, this is what mommy said, I'm going to try and say it back now. And you can see we call her Yoda, because she doesn't speak in order necessarily, but who cares at this point? She's being understood, and she understands that she's being understood, which is possibly the most important part of this. And then I just model back in the right order. I'd like to say that I do that every single time. I don't. I might say it back, but in this case, it worked really well, and I got it on video, which is always fun. So we could probably just move on. And motivation is such a key factor, too. They have to want to talk to you. They have to have something to talk about, right? Think about yourselves in when you're put in a situation to make small talk, right? So if I just walked up to you and I just said, okay, talk to me, right? And you might not know what to talk about, or you might not want to talk, right? And we need to respect that about our children, too, our nonverbal children. But you need to find something that will be interesting, and sometimes that's hard to find something. I know certainly with Ava, when she was going through her regression, it was hard for her to even just attend to anything, to look up from anything. She would just often just sort of stare off and not be interested in anything. And then one day, a speech therapist brought out some bubbles, and she looked up, and she was interested in it. And so we went with that. And it's important, though, again, bubbles work really great for 3-year-olds. If you're working with a 16-year-old student or a 20-year-old, maybe bubbles isn't going to be respectful of their age. And that's a really important thing. So you need to find things that might be entertaining. Maybe it's going to be that you're going to allow your child to determine your makeup for the day. Sure, bright blue on one side, oh, ha, ha, ha. Right? So maybe it's going to be something that is slapstick or funny. Maybe you're going to talk about, I don't know, who just got kicked off on The Bachelor. I don't know. It could be anything. And you're coming up with something that is interesting to them. Have fun, because they will know if you're not enjoying yourself. They will see that. We can probably just skip through this. I'm just looking at the time here. That was basically a video of her decorating cupcakes. She chose what she wanted on the cupcake. She wanted her turn. I was taking too long with her sister, and she was yelling, my turn, because it was motivating for her. And keep looking, you will find something. I could probably talk an hour on each one of these points, and I could probably say that this is the most important point for every single point, but this really is the most important point, and that is presuming competence. And that term is thrown around a lot in AAC, and I take it to mean several things. First and foremost, I take it to mean believing in your child, believing your child can do it. Because if you don't believe your child can do it, then they're going to pick up on that, and possibly they're going to believe that they can't do it too. And conversely, if you don't believe that you can do this also, chances are you're not going to be able to do it. There's a great quote by, I was going to look this up and write it down, but I believe it's Henry Ford who said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And And I think that it is so true, and especially in this, we tell Ava all the time what a great job she's doing. Oh, you're so smart. Oh, this is fantastic. Great communication. And who cares if you make a mistake? It doesn't matter, because that's how you learn. Assume that any communication is on device or off. So that goes back to the looking up for yes. It uses the use of the device. Assume that it's intentional. Assume it's intentional. Because you really have no way of knowing that it's not. I mean, you just have to have a conversation with my older daughter who's 6. I mean, I could ask her, so what'd you do at school today? And she could talk about pirates. That has nothing to do with anything. She just wants to talk about that right now. So great. So then we have that conversation. And same with our kids who are nonverbal when they're using their devices. If they start selecting something, honor that and find the meaning in it. And eventually, even if you're sure this is not intentional, eventually it will become intentional because you're teaching them what these things mean and what it is to communicate. And be open-minded and ignore the naysayers. There are a lot of naysayers. Oh boy, are there ever a lot of people. For every one person that I've found that says, wow, Eva's doing such a great job. All girls with Rett syndrome can do this. I know it. I could probably find 10 people, and I wouldn't have to go very far to find those 10 people who are not believing in this type of communication, right? Until it's abundantly clear. You can always find people who say, oh, it's never going to work. This is too complicated. This is too hard. Your child can't do this, right? And it's hard to tune out those voices, especially as a parent, right? And especially as someone who doesn't have a background in this type of education or this type of communication. And you start to question yourself. I was told not to even start with an eye gaze computer until maybe 7 or 8 years old. And at the time, I was like, nope, not going to do that. And it was challenging. We were the only ones in our community, and the people that I knew that were doing this at this age. And now, of course, people are paying attention and thinking, well, maybe we don't know everything about nonverbal children. And again, if you don't believe in your kid, this is a friend of mine who said that, then nobody else will. I think I'm really looking at the clock here, and we can just skip through that video of presuming competence. But always think that your child knows what they're doing, and reciprocate with them, right? What they're saying. Okay, so a little break in the strategies, and here's a little experiment for all of you sitting here. And this is kind of, I said there, the evolution of my approach. So when Ava first got her machine, or when we first started looking into it, I thought, this is kind of what I was going to put up there, right? I want to know why she's crying. You want a cookie? You want juice? You want a toy? Do you want to go potty maybe? I don't know. These are an example of something that I thought might happen. So then think about this, though. If someone were to give you a cookie, what can you say with this? So you've got cookie, juice, toy, potty. But you can't say much, right? You can identify cookie. You can maybe say you want some juice with your cookie. But what if you don't like orange juice? What if you want milk, right? Not a whole lot here to talk about. So Ava was pretty good at making choices right off the bat once we started understanding how to do this. And it took practice. I know in 20 minutes, or I'm sure I'm going over, I apologize, it seems like, oh, this just comes so easily. It just comes so fast. It doesn't. You got to work on it, right? But know that these things can happen. So I saw this and I thought, well, that's too limiting. No, let's move on. So the next, my next thought, and imagine these all had symbols. I just could not figure out. The irony here is that I am very, very technologically not proficient. So I couldn't figure out how to get pictures on this slide. But imagine these all have symbols also. So this is a theme board, and a lot of kids use these. And it's great, right? Because now, look at how many more things you can say. You can say, I like cookie. I want different cookie. You can say cookie yucky, all done, right? You can say a lot of things. But even this is quite limiting. And again, you know, I know it's like at first, I really just wanted her to be able to say yes or no. But when she starts getting these little things, then you're like, hey, wait a sec, I need more. So now, here's what Ava uses today, and she's learning how to use it. This is called this is SonoFlex, which is a Toby program. It's a robust communication system, which basically means that it's got all of her words, all of the vocabulary, different types of parts of speech. It already comes with 800 words, which at the time seemed so overwhelming, but I got to tell you, I've probably added 800 more words since then. And this is great, because if she wanted to say when she got that cookie, she could say, my friend had that cookie on the bus, and it dropped in the mud, and he ate it anyways. Yuck. Right? So they can come up with a sentence or with a whole thought using a robust communication system. If you flip back, no way to do that with the other ones. Yeah, there's no way to really get to whatever it is that they want to say using that. However, SonoFlex, or any robust communication system, it relies on me to give the words. Right? What if what they want to say is not in that program? Then what? Then what? And so here, I put up here, this is the last one, which is keyboard, which is where I'm hoping to go with Ava eventually to teach literacy so that she can say whatever she wants without depending on someone else. And we can just skip through, sorry. And so that gets to the last one, which is literacy and teaching literacy skills, which is a passion of mine. It's so important that we don't assume that our kids can't learn to read and write just because they cannot talk, just because they are not verbal. It shows that they can. Every day there are stories that come up on the internet. You read about kids who never were given the opportunity. All of a sudden they have a keyboard and they're typing. And they're typing lots of things and lots of interesting things. And I could go on and on about literacy. I won't right now. There are different types of thoughts. But basically what you're going to do is same thing you would do with anyone else. Those same goals that you have for literacy, they remain the same. But how you get to those goals will look very different. And it'll look different for my daughter than it might for your children. But it's definitely achievable.
Sure, yeah. And then, well, I think we only have a few minutes, so I'll try to go through this quickly. I want to share with you a personal story of my daughter's journey with augmentative communication. So we're all on our own unique journeys with AAC. So some kids like Ava have learned to be pretty good communicators, and I mean, Ava's doing really good in a matter of many months with lots of teaching and support. But other kids, like my daughter, Ashley, may need years and many years to master these skills. Like Ashley's 11, we've been working on AAC since before she was 2. She has a rare genetic disorder that makes it really hard for her to learn new skills. But she's really showed the world already now that she can learn so much. So it took her till 2. She needed that oxygen tank, and finally we said goodbye. She finally learned at 4 how to eat. And now eating is something you practice like 4 to 6 times a day. You have breakfast, you have lunch, you have dinner, and snacks, and more snacks. And walking, it took her 8 years to learn to walk with her walker. And we did, for those 8 years, intensive PT. It was very consuming of our funds, our focus, our attention. But now, of course, all that time we were working on communication, but it definitely took a back seat, I would say, to walking and eating, sitting, and some of her health concerns. So I'd really like to recommend to you and anyone that has a younger child to take your communication goals and make those as important as your mobility goals, which for Easter Seals kids is kind of a focus for a lot of us. We want to get our kids walking, and I had people early on tell me, you know, your child will naturally learn to walk before they talk, and there's so many things going on, you kind of put it on the back burner. So, and yeah, So basically, it's hard, but it's possible. So I can remember really early on one of Ashley's speech therapists calling me one day. She was actually quite excited to tell me she'd just been to a conference and had learned that there's lots of research to show that kids with severe disabilities can learn to read. She says it just takes them much more practice and time, but if they are taught, which is really important, it's possible. So this applies, I was really pushing at the time for my child to go to grade 1, where I thought she'd get a little more teaching and literacy. So this applies to all our kids. So they all can learn to read. Ashley has a brother, Taylor, he's 6. For him to learn to read, we probably have to read him a few hundred books. For Ashley, maybe it's a few thousand books. However, you know, she's young, so time is on her side. So just never give up. I also believe that if Ashley does not learn to communicate effectively, it's not that she couldn't learn. It's that I failed to teach her. So that being said, Ashley needs a community around her. It isn't easy, it's not easy, but together we can do better. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about helping your child form friendships. I recently went to a conference and learned a term called social capital. It's something that we all need and benefit from. Friends are very important for our kids too. You have to be a social butterfly for your child, as we know it's hard for nonverbal kids to form friendships. They need lots of assistance with socialization. I reached out to other parents at my child's school, you know, the ones you see while you're waiting for your IPRC. Connect with them. You have different but similar struggles. You can support each other. Open up your home, keep it simple. We do pizza and potluck. There happens to be 5 families who take turns hosting pizza parties. We have 15 kids between us. Sometimes the dads even join us. All the families that attend happen to have children with social challenges, such as autism. There are no kids in my community that have 14q deletion syndrome, as you can probably imagine, which is what my daughter has. These gatherings are priceless to all that attend. Ashley has friends and neighbors that truly care about her and understand how she communicates. Please don't think this was easy for me. Our gatherings actually got started when one of my close neighbors mentioned to me her daughter was showing signs of depression for not having friends. I think she was in grade 3. And I just instinctively said, tell Erin, Friday we're having a pizza party, and invited a few other friends. That was 3 years ago, and it's kind of grown from then. Ashley has 3 brothers. We have 1 income. Entertaining, honestly, with a complex child is not something that we do, but these gatherings are honestly priceless to us. And then, these are some pictures, or if you go back, some pictures of, we can skip through anyways, of our friendships, and it's just as important to the moms. We get as much out of it as the kids. And then this is the problem that I have now for Ashley. The real problem is that Ashley has an excess of social capital. So last week we had a birthday party. Do you have a video here? Sorry. Yeah, and then just press. This is 15-second video actually. And basically, Ashley has so much friends. I don't have a big enough budget or room to have all her friends come to her parties. So I had 18 friends there. She could have had 30 friends there. So for your kids, you can honestly reach out to your neighbors, reach out to your community. It is invaluable. It really is. But even that, all those friends she has, still for me wasn't enough. So a few years ago, I really wanted Ashley to meet other AAC users. So I want to encourage you to seek out AAC clubs or groups within your treatment center, your recreation department, your local libraries. If they don't exist, which is the problem I had when I first went looking for them, you can work together with your community to make them happen. Your municipality has funds, has resources. If you bring them ideas that have a common mission, things can happen. So in York Region, the libraries now run a program with CTN called I Can Tell a Story Too. I honestly just went in the library and asked, hey, can we have story time for kids that don't talk? They literally said, we have a mission to serve people with disabilities. We don't know how. Do you want to work with us? We'd love to. Like, they were very receptive. So, and if the person you're talking to says no, you're just talking to the wrong person. Ask someone else. Seriously. Okay. And then I'll go back. This is just quickly some pictures of our group. For one thing, if you go to your municipality or your library, they run free programs or very low cost. Okay, if I did look at some like autism groups because they have a lot of AAC users, but oh sure, we'll create a group, that'll be $400 for 8 sessions. Budget was an interest to me, so really reach out to your municipalities for those resources and funds. The group that CTN runs is really focused around communication and literacy. The kids are doing crafts, they're out. The librarians now understand AAC at the Maple Library, the Markham Stouffville Library. There are, maybe not all of them, but there are some there, the Richmond Hill. So it generates awareness. And really these organizations, they're here to service your children. They want and need your input. So really be persistent. If I could do it, I know some of you could do it. So go out there and see what you can get going. And this is just some awesome websites. So if you're not that social, that eager beaver, go online. These are very supportive groups, websites, blogs. You'll be encouraged, you'll feel motivated. Check them out. And then lastly, we're going to close the day just with a few, I think we're running behind, but a few tips for school. And this is an image that I highly suggest you put a message like this on your child's device. So this one just reads, presume confidence. She means what she says. Reply to everything she says. Respect her answers. And I think for my daughter, this is the most important one. Wait patiently for her to answer. She will answer not on your timeline. That is hard for us fast-talking parents and teachers and EAs that it takes our kids a long time to process. And an OT on Ashley's team at our SPOC meetings, she would always give this analogy for the school staff to understand that Ashley's communication device is just like her eyeglasses. It has to be always on and available to her. So tip number 3 would be ask AAC questions in your home and school communication book. Give them updates what your child's communicating at home. Make it your child's #1 goal, IEP goal. If it's a real struggle for them, it's important. Tip number 5 is don't be afraid to point out if you feel your child's communication device is coming home unused or there's not enough focus. Talk to your teacher about it. I know sometimes these discussions are challenging or difficult, but if you don't go there, you don't bring it up quickly too, like right away, then things won't change. And you need the school and home to be on board. For my child to learn this, we need to work on this at home with their nurses, at school, round the clock. She can't learn this on her own or just with me. And also share resources and tips with your teacher, help them along, and even maybe offer to program the device to meet their needs. So thank you for taking the time to come and listen to us. We have one short video to show if there's, I don't know if we have time. And we'll definitely take your questions.
We were supposed to be in the auditorium at 3:15.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if anyone has a question or if you want to run over there, we have some books. I have some books for you too on an AAC user at school. It's really cute.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.